Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil's on the show. I'm Matt Prehm. It's another edition of the show of the Autzen Audibles podcast. We're talking Oregon football. Ducks are one full scrimmage in. The time of this recording, they'll do another one in a couple days. And then it culminates with their annual spring game on the 26th at Autzen Stadium, 1 p.m. Big Ten kickoff. And the Ducks are, I bet you, Erik, there's probably going to be a little added boost here from a marketing standpoint to try and get as many people as they can into the stadium just to kind of send a message across college football of we're still doing a spring sport. We're still playing a spring football game. We're still going to get 35, 40 plus thousand people, and you guys are going away from doing this. Look at us.
Yeah, I know. I was talking to somebody who was at one of his Oregon club meetings, and he was really pushing how excited he was for the spring game and trying to get everybody out here, and kind of reiterated what he told. I think it was Jared maybe who asked the question way back in March about a spring game. Of just well, while I'm here, we're going to do it. Everybody else might be moving to these different formats, but no, we're going to play a game. It's important for us from a competition perspective. It's important for our fans. So yeah, you can kind of start feeling that coming up here. I mean, I know for me, it's been a long wait just to see football of any kind. And April 26th is it's the big one for sure.
We're recording the show on Wednesday, the 16th of April. So 10 days away from the spring game. It's also the first day that the spring window for the transfer portal has opened. And Oregon's in kind of a curious position. I'm going to read a quote here, Erik, and then we can respond from Dan Lanning. He was asked about a house settlement that, quite frankly, hasn't been settled yet. A part of that with the NCAA case includes roster size. Everyone's anticipating that you have to get down to 105 players no matter what. And that whether those are all scholarship guys, whether they're walk-ons, no matter what, 105 players, that number seems to be kind of in limbo. We'll see what happens. It's also the portal opening, and Dan Lanning was asked about just kind of how the program is operating where kind of roster sizes is in limbo right now. This is what he said: adapt. You got to be ready to adapt. That's one thing we've learned about college football. It's going to continue to change. You got to be the team that's ready to adapt when that happens. And I like our roster. I like who we have on our team right now. Hopefully every one of those players that worked really hard to get the opportunity to be part of the roster in fall camp. But we don't completely control all of that. So we'll see how it plays out. End quote. There's a lot there, but there's also not a lot.
Well, that's Dan. I was going to say, that's Dan in a nutshell. First off, I think if you're an Oregon fan, you love hearing a quote like that from the guy leading the program, just the adapt part, which is just so in line with what he said every time he's asked about something like this that's out of his control. Is whatever the rules are, we'll do them at our best. And why I say that you love hearing that is there are coaches all over the country complaining and bitching about the rules and how they're unfair and blah, blah, blah. And that's their prerogative. And maybe as Dan gets a little bit more established, gets into his 40s, frankly, there'll be a shift and he'll feel like he can kind of throw his weight around and his word will mean a little bit more. But ultimately, I think you just like that there's somebody who's kind of has that approach of head down. Okay, whatever you tell me what the rules are, we'll figure it out. Has been Dan's approach. And I guess I'll be really interested to see kind of the part out of control, what that means from this year's perspective from Oregon, right? Of are they anticipating some departures? What do those look like? How does that shape this spring portal window for us? Because frankly, Matt, you look at the roster, I think you could say, does Oregon need maybe another linebacker just to kind of fill out the depth? Maybe that makes a little sense. Just could the Ducks use a slot receiver who's got some experience? I know Trevor Pena, who Ross Douglas coached at Syracuse, his name has been thrown in. That's a name that has been hot in the Duck community the last couple of days. Does it make sense to go that route? Well, it's probably somewhat contingent upon what kind of departures we see. And obviously we're recording this right as everything's starting. No news yet, but I will be very curious to see what these next couple of days look like, just from an Oregon perspective, and how much of this roster turns over. Does some of it turn over, and kind of how does that make you feel about where this is heading? I guess.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now. Is we're seeing if any turnover will happen. And look, you and I haven't heard specific names that are for sure considering or going into the portal, but we could easily find a handful of guys that it would make sense for them to do it, and we wouldn't be surprised by that. But I think it's Lanning saying like, "Hey, like we like our roster.
Yeah.
We are content with what it is." And that's my word, not his. He didn't use content. But he said hopefully everyone comes back and can be part of this roster. So to me, that tells me if they do make an addition, it's probably going to be because they know someone's leaving, or they know that someone's done with football at Oregon, and that opened a new door for them to explore. There are needs, no doubt about it,
Yep.
but they're right up on that cusp already of 105, and if it gets bumped down to 85, I don't know the full debates right now if that's on the table or not. That makes it really complicated. But the portal's going to close here in about a week and a half, and we'll know for sure kind of what Oregon's current roster looks like, and if there's any departures, if that leads to any potential additions. But right now they're set, and I think Oregon's going to be they're going to tread a lot of water in the pool. Like they're not really going to go anywhere. They're going to stay afloat. They're going to make sure that they're visible and that they're seeing the land, but they're not really doing anything. They're just kind of sitting there waiting to see what's happening right now.
Yeah, right. Like you're kind of waiting to see if there's anything that makes sense, and then if it does, you're ready to pounce. And I think that's always going to be Oregon's approach, because I think also, frankly, the question is, I threw out a couple positions that made sense. I do think Pena would make sense as a take. The Syracuse receiver almost had 1,000 yards last year, played a lot in the slot. Like that continuity with Douglas kind of lines up. Excuse me. But the other part is, like I mentioned, linebacker. Like it's possible you look around and see who enters, and it's like, no, none of these guys are upgrades over what we have, and so we're not going to just bring in a guy to bring a guy because we think we need depth. So so much of this is going to be contingent on like who actually enters. And as I think we had Chris Hummer on way back when, and he was talking about the difference in the winter portal and the spring portal, and basically saying like you just don't expect many game changers are in the spring. That's where you feel like kind of a hole here, maybe like a second tier guy on a in a position group who's on a starter. You kind of fill a hole there, maybe fill one here, but in general, you're not going star chasing. And so we'll see what ends up kind of presenting itself and what looks like it's viable. But yeah, it's certainly going to be a fun. I don't know. I'm sure it's not really for staffs across the country, because if you're Oregon, you're preparing for a spring game and you're also trying to recruit your own players and maybe recruit other players. But for fans following the sport, gosh, the roster acquisition portion just never seems to stop. And certainly we're entering another one of them right now, which is kind of strange considering that we're already through this part of spring. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll have changes to the window. I know James Franklin from Penn State went on the soapbox and had a lot of things to say, which frankly, most of which I agreed about yesterday. We'll see if there are changes, but ultimately, as Dan said, this is the kind of circumstances you're in, and you got to play ball this way. So yeah, it is what it is.
Now, we did speak with a couple coaches plus Dan Lanning the last couple days. We got some really good insights on just the football team currently in Eugene, currently practicing, currently getting ready for the 2025 season. An interesting one is Rashad Samples, Oregon's associate head coach, also their running backs coach. A guy that highly regarded when he showed up, a really young, talented, up-and-coming college coach. Also spent some time in the NFL, has deep ties from a recruiting perspective in the state of Texas, in particular the Dallas area, has had a small sample, but it's growing, of really talented players that he's worked with, and he was sought after. Not only, he didn't talk about this one, but he was offered or interviewed for the Sam Houston State job, the head coaching position.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled his name out of that, and then later, this one felt serious, and he kind of talked on it. You can touch us up on it here a little bit, but Dallas Cowboys, the NFL came calling, and he went through that process, and that one felt more serious. Of they actually might lose him here than the Sam Houston one.
Yeah, I thought Rashad just gave some incredibly interesting insights into the staff kind of dynamics and what it's like to be an Oregon assistant coach in the Dan Lanning era. And I thought his answer to that was really summed it up really well. Of yeah, Dallas is home. That's where he's from. Matt mentioned it. His dad's the head coach at Duncanville High School. Longtime listeners know that's where DeCorian's from. Those connections and how that impacted that recruitment. But it would make a lot of sense to go. He's been in the NFL before. Reunite with that opportunity, be coaching in your home city, basically. But he thought, he said it. I mean, ultimately, his goal is to be head coach. Like that's what he wants, and he felt spending time around Dan Lanning, watching him prepare, watching how he handles his program. He talked a lot about like how Dan gave him. It sounded like kind of a little bit more special attention maybe during the bowl prep, or maybe gave him access to more things to just kind of see what it was like to prepare for such a game. And you got a sense listening to Rashad, like he took that stuff to heart so much that he's like, this is where I need to be the best head coach I can be at some point in my career. And, you hear people talk about, you hear a coach like him, a young coach who's just turned 30, talk about that. And you go, this kind of is what it sounded like when, Nick Saban and those guys were grooming all these great young coaches. And I know that's something that Dan has made very clear he's passionate about, of mentoring young coaches, developing them. And you kind of got you got a sense of it from the Rashad side of what that might look like. And he basically said the reason he's coming back is his heart's in Oregon, but ultimately it's because he wants to be a head coach and he feels like Dan Lanning is the guy to groom him towards that job. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Again, gives you a sense of what this might look like on the inside in terms of Dan and how people around him actually see him, and really speaks to, I think, like this is why, sure, Oregon may lose assistant coaches, but when they do lose them, I think they're going to be losing them to dream opportunities, like the best of the best. You're not going to see Oregon lose guys to, linear jobs that are on the same tier. You're going to see them taking the bigger ones because they feel like there's a lot of value of being in his orbit and kind of being around him.
Yeah, this is just another example of, I think Lanning's really done a good job of grooming his staff and giving them opportunities to learn different roles, elevated roles on the job, on the fly, and prepare them for positions. And like that's what you want out of a leader. When you hire somebody, you want this person to cultivate a talented group of people that's going to work under this person, and ultimately you train and develop them to move on to a better position at the next stop. And a unilateral move almost feels kind of like that person saying, like, this isn't working out. I don't have a path to further enhance myself. I need to go somewhere else to get that, to improve myself. And to date, like everyone that's left Oregon, they have gone for a job promotion. It's not been an elevated job title.
I think the only one was Coach Meat, who just seems to like jumping around.
Yes, that's true. And to his credit, he jumped back to his alma mater. So
fair.
There is a little bit of there. But to your point, it's only one. And this is the off season. Every off season they've dealt with stuff. And this was just some really good insight. We've got some stories up on it on duckterritory.com. And another guy that spoke for the first time with us, Ross Douglas, Oregon's new receivers coach. We kind of knew the connection here, that they were aware of each other. And I think everyone kind of says, oh yeah, like we're buddies, and that like this is more than like buddies. These are guys that hour-long conversations about their jobs, their career paths, advice to one another when they're not even in the same like tier of football. Like they are regular communicators. This was a really insightful conversation.
Yeah, no, it was. So yeah, I mean, Rashad and Ross, same year in high school, big time receiver recruits from different parts of the country. And they like competed at camps. I think James Creppy asked about an Elite 11 camp they both competed in, during high school, like 10 years ago, like more than that, 12, I think it would be. So yeah, these guys have known each other for a long time. And it was notable that like they built this kind of interesting fraternity. Well, they're not, like you said, Matt, like not even being on the same staffs. I think Ross reached out to Rashad when Rashad got the job with the Rams and Ross was with the Patriots, and was like, hey, I'm the youngest assistant coach in the NFL and you're the second youngest. And of course, Rashad looked up their ages. This is part of the interview, which is kind of comical. And was like, actually, I'm 7 days younger than you are. So you're actually the second youngest and I'm the youngest. But because of that, they developed this like really tight bond, and they were calling each other all the time, kind of talking about what life was like as a young 28-year-old assistant football coach in the NFL, and the kind of the difficulties and rigors of that. And like I just think that's really cool to hear that that those relationships are built behind the scenes amongst people who like are kind of directly competing against each other at least maybe one Sunday a year, perhaps, depending on the schedule. Like that part was interesting. And then the fact that, they're now reunited at Oregon, and it sounds like they're just like pretty much best friends, spending all sorts of time together in their office. And, while Rashad is the running backs coach and Ross is the receivers coach, like they both coached both positions. So there's a level of respect and kind of like throwing things at the wall together. And, it sounded actually a lot like kind of, I think at one point I'd like to ask Dan about this, but you remember how Dan was talking about how Kenny Dillingham was his like whiteboard, whatever, like they would write up plays against each other. Kenny would try to run the offense against Dan's defense. Like that was something Rashad said he and Ross are doing in their offices all the time right now. And so, I don't want to get too far down the line, but like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if one of these guys gets a head coaching job. Maybe it would be Rashad. He seems really focused on that in the next 3 to 4 years. Like Ross sounds like somebody who maybe would just follow him as the offensive coordinator or something, right? Like I'm throwing something out here of just like, these are guys who clearly really respect each other, are really good friends. And like, if there are opportunities together, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up working, together on a staff somewhere else. But the fact that they're here together is really cool. And then I think I'd already knew this independently, but I hadn't really put it all together that Rashad, Will, and Drew Maringer were all on the same staff at Texas at the same time, where Drew was basically the superior to both Will, who was a GA, and Rashad, who was a student assistant. So like that's this offensive staff, aside from a leak, they're very, very tight knit. And aside from a leak, like Rashad has a direct connection to each of them.
Yeah. That matters. Like who you come to work with every day and get along with, have personal relationships with, you can be real with one another. And you got that sense with Rashad and Ross, and I'm sure it's that way with the entire staff. But
right,
when you're in a position where everyone you work with, you're close and tight knit with, and you've got a really good understanding of one another, like that's where really good things happen, whether it's in the business world or in the sports world.
Right.
And that speaks to, I think, the alignment that Lanning has with this staff. And, like he went on Bustin' and the Boys, and I saw this clip of their podcast, and he was asked about about the NFL and if he had any interest in it. And he came out and said, like, at one point I did, but I've got everything I want here and at Oregon. Like they've taken a chance on me, and I've got an infrastructure and I've got a staff, and the way we work, I don't want to leave this. And I think getting guys on staff like Ross and like Rashad and the connections that you have with one another, I think that only is going to make it harder for Lanning to want to leave too. Like the names are going to change. Like Ross Douglas and Rashad Samples will eventually get elevated positions at some point down the road. That Rashad simply came out and said, like, I want to be a head coach at some point.
Yeah.
And
like
that will probably happen at some point. Or he'll have to leave to get that job somewhere else at Oregon. But the names will change. But I think the culture that Lanning is cultivated, with whether it's player related or staff related, I think is a big indicator of why he stays too.
No, that's a great point. And I think it becomes pretty clear just talking to all these guys that, like, we're not in the interview process at all, but it's pretty clear Dan wants people around him that he likes. I know that sounds super, super obvious, but like, how it is, like in business, like there are sometimes the best candidate isn't always like the one you get along with the best, and you have to kind of bite the bullet. I'm not saying that Dan won't hire somebody he doesn't like, but it's pretty clear, and maybe he's just been fortunate and the names have come together, but that like, this is a staff that seems to get along really well and has a lot of mutual respect for each other. And I think that's something that, like you said earlier, Matt, like that ultimately should be conducive to better coaching, better rosters, better cohesion behind the scenes. And, all those things are really important, especially like when you're coming off a year like last year, where like, there were difficult conversations behind the scenes after the way that season ended against Ohio State. Like you just, like if they're being honest with themselves, like they look around, they probably all feel like I let somebody down in some way with the way that game played out. And now we get to see how they build off of that. And I think that'll be one of the things that will be really interesting is kind of how does this group respond now from what was one of the greatest seasons in school history, still deserves to be in that conversation, but ended in such a way that is obviously very disappointing for everybody who wears the Oregon colors.
Also, our most recent interview, we got to speak with Mekhi Hughes, the Tulane transfer running back who will be entering his first year at Oregon, junior, over, I think, 2,700 yards in his career.
Lots of production.
A lot of production. First instance, he's a first off the bus type guy. Yes, absolutely. If you're not watching the video, absolutely stacked. He is a humongous wide body.
Yep.
From a running back perspective, and you can quickly figure out why he has a reputation of running over dudes because, good Lord, he looked like he was wearing pads and he was in a t-shirt. He fits the total definition of SEC style running back from a body type. But first opportunity for us to talk with him, and it was also the first opportunity for anyone in the media to get the story about why he left Tulane and how he came to Oregon. And I never really put two and two together until the day of the interview. And I straight up asked him, how much did Naeem Offord coming to Oregon matter to you? And if you're unfamiliar with that, Naeem Offord is his younger brother. They played 2 years of high school football together in the state of Alabama. And then Mekhi Hughes went to Tulane, and Offord continued to be a star high school player, was a 5-star, was committed to Ohio State, and then flipped on signing day. And Mekhi, didn't say, whoever got my brother got me, but or it was a stipulation that if you take my brother, you gotta take me too. But he did say I was always kind of planning on going wherever he wanted to go because we wanted to play together. And it just happened to be Oregon. And he talked a lot about the strengths of Oregon. And look, I think if Naeem wasn't here, he probably would still be here from an enticement standpoint and the opportunity to play and the scheme fit. But just another layer of Oregon getting a guy, in part because of who also is already in the building.
Yeah, it's like a package deal that he didn't directly say was a package deal. I'll just read the quote. He said, "It was my decision. It was my brother's decision. But wherever he planned to go, I was planning to go with him together." So I'm guessing they both behind the scenes were probably going okay, Naeem, wherever you're picking, I probably want to go there. So let's pick a school we both like. Obviously Naeem was the one who announced it first. Tulane's season was still, I guess, maybe not ongoing, but he wasn't in the portal until after Naeem made his decision. But ultimately, this is really cool to have two brothers here together. I mean, you touched on it in the story, some of the quotes there about how they've been smiling together. They're just seeing each other at practice makes them smile. How this has impacted their family, how much their mom loves the idea of hey, we get to fly to one place to go watch football games. We don't have to split time flying to one place and another place. No, we can go to the same place every time. To see both our kids, that's really cool, really special. I think these are both really special individual players too. And I'm really excited, frankly, to see both of them play. And the other unique part is I'm sure there have been times in practice where Naeem has to come up and try to tackle his brother. And I'm gonna guess it doesn't go great for the true freshman, even though everybody knows Naeem is going to probably be one of, he has a chance to be one of the best corners the school's produced. He's the highest rated corner the school's ever signed, but he's a true freshman going against his brother, who, as Matt said, looks the part. We haven't got to see anything in practice. And, coaches and players who have obviously been around have said, boy, does he pack a punch when he does make contact. I think it was Noah who was even being even before we started doing full contact stuff, with the ball in our hands in pass pro, he was just lighting guys up. So yeah, I would imagine there's going to be some fun practice banter between the two brothers, and probably really good for challenging both of them. But yeah, it's a really cool story and awesome that they both decided, hey, let's let's go play this, let's go play together somewhere. And the fact that Oregon was the beneficiary of that with two players who ultimately, I think, clearly have NFL talent, it's really exciting.
Now, we've buried the lead scrimmage. We were not able to go into the scrimmage. So, there was no visible action by any of the media to see it. And then we were left with asking Dan Lanning about the scrimmage. And to just use a word I used previously, good luck. Dan does not share very much.
I will say, Matt, I think Dan has improved his art of saying like 100-word answers with giving you zero information that is very valuable for you. And like, kudos to him. If that's how he wants to run his program, he's gotten really good at it.
Yes. And that comes with just more interviews, more opportunity to practice how to say it. And yeah, you're right. He's gotten better at saying a lot without really saying anything. He did give us a little bit. He did call like Saturday scrimmage right off the field, competitive toughness he saw on both sides. He said there was back and forth. The offense had a good start and the defense kind of battled back. He did say on Saturday that there was some bombs over the top offensively, some big explosive plays. And then on Tuesday, he talked a little bit about it again. And I asked a follow-up, I knew he would. It was like that movie with Ben Stiller with the weight camp, where it's like, I know you, you know you, yes. I know that you know that I know you.
What movie is that?
I can't remember, but that's the quote. Like, I knew he wasn't gonna give me everything. I think he knew he wasn't gonna do that. But I asked him, like, who were the guys that made explosive plays? And he cracked a smile. I was like, I'm not going to tell you everything. But he did say Gary Bryant did have one early over the season. And look, we have to take him at his word. It's face value, what have you. We don't know the play. We don't know the quarterback. We don't know the guy he was against, the situation.
Yeah, sure.
But the fact that it's Gary Bryant, I think, is a positive sign because he did nothing really for the team last season because of injury. And I keep going back to there were spurts during the 2023 season, the big one against ASU, obviously, where he showcased he's got that big play threat if given the chance. To see that or to hear that he did it again, it's a good sign. But not much was gleaned other than competitive spirit back and forth, and that the offense did have some bombs on the defense.
The movie was Heavyweights. Yeah, Dan also said, I mean, I'm just parsing whatever he can. I asked about the true freshman running backs, and he said D'Air Hill had a couple nice runs. Like, honestly, like I was a little taken aback with, like, he was actually pretty complimentary. Not that he's not usually complimentary, but like he was like really like, these guys have some stuff. These guys have some juice. Like, but he did mention D'Air had a nice scrimmage, which, I mean, you love to hear a true freshman in his first scrimmage at a school going out there, making some plays, turning some heads like that. That sounds really, that sounds really promising, at least for the time being. We'll see if that matters in the fall. It might not, just because of the running back depth chart. But there's not a lot to take from it. Dan is, of course, he has all the answers and he can distribute them how he feels comfortable. And the answer he doesn't really want to give us very many of them, and that's his prerogative. But I ultimately, like, what this means is we're just looking more and more forward to April 26th, where everybody gets a chance to kind of just get our first glimpse of what this team looks like. So many questions. I'm excited over the next week or so to kind of talk out, kind of on our preview show next week of, okay, what are some things we want to see? Because I think we're all in agreement. Like, there's a long list, and it's going to be something where we're probably all spending that Saturday following and kind of paying close attention to different things, just because none of us have seen, really anything at all from this spring.
Yeah, and that's going to be the part that's going to be hard, is you don't want to make too wide of sweeping opinions on what we see next week. And I think naturally everything's going to be geared towards the quarterbacks because that's the big job, and it's open. There's going to be a lot of intrigue there. We'll see what happens. And Lanning did say, like, hey, like they show promise, but there's also plenty of room for both guys or all the guys at that position to drastically improve as well. All right, that's going to do it for us, I think, here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. We'll be back again with some more Oregon football coverage. You can go to spring coverage on duckterritory.com for more insight into what's going on the program, as well as transfer portal news, basketball recruiting for both the women and the men. Jared is also heavy deep in the baseball team coverage as they're a top 25 team. And then we've got a softball team that we're covering as well. That's a top 10 program right now. And our intern, John Evans, is doing a great job with Autzen Oda as well, covering the women's team, softball team for the Ducks. So you can read all about all of that on duckterritory.com. But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.